I was rinsing out my coffee cup when the text came in. "Hi, honey. We've been talking and we want a peaceful Thanksgiving this year just with Taryn's family. Maybe you could sit this one out. We need space." My thumb hovered over the screen. A moment passed, then another. I didn't scroll, didn't reread, didn't call. I typed one word: enjoy. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and finished drying the mug like nothing had happened. But everything had. For 34 years, I had played the role eldest daughter steady performer, the one who never needed to be asked. I showed up when my parents were overwhelmed. I showed up when my sister forgot things. I showed up even when I wasn't invited, and I made it easier for everyone to forget that I existed on the periphery. But this wasn't forgetfulness. This was precision. This was the line. My hands were steady, but I could feel the tremble starting in my spine, the slow unfurling of disbelief that spreads like cold. Not anger, not yet. Just the weight of being made optional. I sat at the edge of my bed, knees tucked close, the phone still blank on the nightstand. I should have cried. Instead, I remembered. Last Thanksgiving, I'd brought a bottle of wine aged exactly the same number of years as my latest promotion. I thought it was symbolic, thought it meant something. I'd announced the news between the turkey and the green beans, proud of how far I'd come. Dad nodded absently. Mom smiled and said, "That's wonderful, sweetie. By the way, did I tell you Taryn's organizing the school bake sale with gluten-free options?" Everyone clapped. I watched them toast my sister with cider while my own news dried on the tablecloth like spilled gravy. So no, this year, I wouldn't be there. I reached for my laptop and opened a folder I hadn't touched in weeks, Villa Planning. A quiet thrill stirred somewhere beneath the hurt, not because they cut me out, but because now, finally, I could choose what to do with the space they left behind. The silence after my text wasn't new. It was just louder now that I'd stopped mistaking it for peace. I didn't respond again, didn't check to see if they'd followed up. They hadn't. Instead, I opened old files, ones not stored on a laptop but in memory. And once I started, I couldn't stop. I thought about freshman year of college when I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover books and rent. I'd call home between shifts bone-tired but proud. Mom would tell me I was so resilient, then pivot to Taryn's chemistry class anxiety or her upcoming trip to Coachella. By junior year, I'd saved enough for a used Toyota Corolla. I was giddy when I drove it home for spring break. A week later, they gave Taryn a brand new hatchback for her birthday. "She needs something reliable for commuting," Dad said, handing over the keys like it was obvious. Every time I voiced the imbalance, Mom would tilt her head and say, "But Coralie, you're so capable. Taryn needs a little more help." That word capable wasn't a compliment. It was a sedative, a way to tuck me quietly into the background and focus the spotlight where it had always lived. Holidays became background noise. I'd show up gifts and hand updates rehearsed. They'd ask about my job just long enough to bridge the conversation to Taryn's Etsy side hustle or her daughter's pre-K piano recital. One year, I was seated at the far end of the table across from the neighbor's college-aged son. Mom said it was just logistics. And yet I kept showing up. Part loyalty, part reflex. The only person who ever noticed the imbalance out loud was Aunt Judith, my mother's older sister. She came to visit after I graduated. We sat on the porch watching Taryn show off her new earrings to a cluster of relatives inside. "They love you, Coralie," she said, soft but clear. "But they love the version of you that doesn't ask for anything." I remember nodding, even smiling as if that truth didn't sting. I closed the memory like a drawer, then stood up and walked to the kitchen. It was time to make a list, not of what I was missing, but of who had seen me all along. The house was mine, finally. A white clapboard farmhouse tucked at the edge of the Hudson Valley, surrounded by turning maples and the quiet kind of land that doesn't ask anything from you. I'd closed on it in August after 6 years of saving, running the math 100 different ways until I could make it work. The plan had always been spring, time to furnish to ease into it, but something about being told to sit this one out had flipped a switch. If they didn't want me at their table, maybe I didn't need to be there. Maybe I could build one of my own. The idea started slowly an idle sketch on the back of a receipt, a half-drafted email to Aunt Judith, a call to the neighbor who watched the property. But then it took on shape. A guest list, a menu, a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. I texted my cousins Theo and Elise, the ones who always remembered my birthday, even when my parents didn't. They both said yes within minutes. Aunt Judith replied with 3 words, "Say when, sweetheart." Then there was Malcolm, my childhood friend, who once drove 3 hours to fix a flat tire I didn't even ask for help with. He answered my invitation with a photo of a pie dish in the words, "I'm bringing 2." I made the list longer than I expected. Co-workers, neighbors, people who'd stood beside me during breakups promotions that awful year when I lost my lease and kept showing up anyway. This wasn't about proving anything. Not anymore. I wasn't trying to outshine my parents or teach them a lesson. I just wanted something different, something honest. Still, one name stayed on the edge of the page. Taryn, or maybe more accurately, Emma and Jonah, her kids. I loved them. They didn't ask for the roles we were cast in, but inviting them felt like letting the past sneak in the side door. In therapy that week, I asked Dr. Hess if I was sabotaging my piece by considering it. "You don't have to burn the old house down," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You can just stop living in it." I wrote Taryn's name in pencil and underlined it twice. Not a decision. A maybe. Back at the house, I cleared off the long wooden table that came with the place. It seated 12. I ran my fingers across the grain and imagined filling it glasses, clinking voices, rising kids laughing from the next room. I wasn't planning an escape. I was planting something. And for the first time in years, I wanted to stay. The responses came in faster than I'd anticipated, quick, heartfelt yeses from nearly everyone I reached out to. Elise booked her train ticket from Boston within hours. Theo asked if he could bring his partner Clara and their rescue dog. Aunt Judith said she'd be driving up early to help cook and make sure no one tries to bring boxed stuffing. Even Malcolm sent me a Spotify playlist labeled Jensen's First Annual Reclamation Dinner. I mapped out sleeping arrangements like a puzzle, moved beds, ordered extra linens, turned the sunroom into a bunk space for the kids. I planned meals with color-coded lists, one column for ingredients, another for who would cook what. I even printed out instructions for a scavenger hunt just in case the younger guests got restless. There was something sacred about the rhythm of it all, folding napkins, testing wine pairings, learning how to pronounce gratin dauphinois from YouTube videos. For once, I wasn't preparing for approval. I was preparing for welcome. Then came the message. "Travis, hey, can we talk for a second?" I stared at the screen. We'd never texted before. Not directly. Curious, I called. "Hey," he said, sounding uncertain. "I hope this isn't crossing a line." There was a pause, one that held more than small talk. "Taryn doesn't know I'm reaching out," he admitted. "Things have been a lot lately. She's stressed the kids are picking up on it. And when I heard from Elise that you're doing something different this year," he trailed off. I waited. "I guess I just wanted to ask, is there a place for us too?" The question sat between us heavier than I expected. My first instinct was no. Not out of bitterness, but protection. For once, I had built something that didn't center around Taryn, didn't bend around her moods or needs. Letting them in felt like opening a gate that I had finally learned how to lock. But then I thought of Emma's gap-toothed smile, Jonah's dinosaur drawings, the way Travis always seemed quietly aware of how skewed the family scales had been. "I haven't decided," I said finally. "I need to think about it. I'm trying to do this differently. I want to make sure it still feels like mine." "Fair," he said gently. "And for what it's worth, thank you for even considering it." After we hung up, I stood in the middle of my kitchen phone, still warm in my palm. I looked around at the baskets of linens, the folding chairs stacked by the door, the playlist humming low through the speakers. There was room, physically at least. I just wasn't sure if I had enough space in me. I called Travis the next morning. I didn't want to leave it open-ended. I needed clarity, his and mine. "I've thought about it," I said, not waiting for small talk. "You're welcome to come, but it has to be different." He didn't speak, so I continued. "This house, this table, it's mine. I built this space so I wouldn't have to shrink anymore. So if you come, it's not to replay old roles. It's not so Taryn can take center stage again without noticing who she's stepping over. If she's coming, she needs to understand that. There was a pause, then his voice low and sincere. I understand. And I'll make sure she does too. Honestly, I think this might be good for her. For all of us. I believed him not because he promised anything, but because he didn't try to smooth it over. He accepted my terms without flinching. That mattered. After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a moment longer, resisting the urge to scroll back through old texts. But it didn't matter. The latest one had just arrived, from my mother. Hey, sweetheart. Just confirming what time is Taryn's family arriving on Thursday. No, are you coming? No, will we see you there? Just the assumption that I was out of the frame like always. I didn't reply. I let the silence hold. Because this year I wasn't going to explain my absence. I wasn't going to offer context to people who never asked for it when I was present. I wasn't going to fight for a place in a story that only saw me when I was useful. Let them set the table without me. I had my own to prepare. That evening, I folded linen napkins with deliberate care, setting them beside mismatched plates I'd collected from flea markets over the years. Each one different, each one chosen. I labeled place cards and wrote names slowly. Malcolm, Elise, Aunt Judith, Theo, Clara. Then hesitating only for a second, I added 4 more. Travis, Taryn, Emma, Jonah. I stacked the cards neatly and tucked them into the drawer just beneath the printed menu. There was still time and plenty left to do, but my seat at this table was already claimed. By noon, the gravel drive had become a carousel of headlights and laughter. Cars rolled in with back seats packed tight pillows, pie tins, board games, bottles of wine. Hugs landed fast and familiar. Scarves were flung on hooks, shoes kicked off at the door. The kitchen filled first, of course. That's where everything good begins. Elise brought a sweet potato dish that was still warm. Malcolm came bearing 2 pies and a playlist labeled Soft Autumn Comeback. Aunt Judith unpacked a tote bag of sharp opinions and hand-pressed cider. Theo and Clara arrived with their dog and an apology for the fur already coating their sweaters. No one asked what time dinner would start. No one watched the clock or waited for a cue. They drifted in and out of rooms, helping themselves to coffee and company. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and real had been missing for a long time. I had just finished arranging the table settings when I heard a car crunch up the drive. I didn't move right away. I let the moment stretch. Then Emma's voice high and clear. Auntie Core. She tumbled out of the back seat with Jonah close behind both kids, barreling through fallen leaves and into my arms. I knelt to hug them, letting their excitement wash over the nerves I hadn't admitted I had. When I looked up, Taryn was standing a few steps behind, holding the car door like it might keep her steady. Her eyes scanned the house, the porch, me. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. I nodded. "I'm glad you came." She stepped forward almost cautiously. "Thank you for having us." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't an explanation, but it wasn't nothing. I held the door open and let them in. The table filled slowly like water rising in a glass. Voices layered over one another, stories, laughter, inside jokes that hadn't aged a day. The food was imperfect, but full of intention, a patchwork of recipes and borrowed spices. Clara's mushroom stuffing collapsed in the middle. Aunt Judith called it rustic. We all agreed that was better anyway. I sat at the head of the table, wineglass in hand, watching it all unfold. The warmth wasn't just from the fire or the food. It came from being known. No performance, no spotlight to chase or avoid, just people who saw me. Across from me, Taryn was quieter than usual. She hadn't said much since they arrived, but she listened. I caught her watching me, watching the way Theo asked for my opinion on the wine pairing, the way Emma leaned against my shoulder without hesitation, the way Aunt Judith kept saying, "Coralie, remember that time," as if the memories belonged to both of us. She was seeing something, and for once, she didn't seem to be comparing it to herself. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed. Then Malcolm's, then Theo's. A ripple of alerts moved down the table. Taryn glanced at her phone and went pale. "It's Mom." No one moved. She looked at me. I nodded once. Taryn answered and set the phone in the center of the table on speaker. "Hi, Mom." "Taryn." "Where are you?" "We've been calling all afternoon. Dinner's ruined. Your father's upset. We thought you were coming." "We're at Coralie's," Taryn said simply. There was a beat of stunned silence on the line. Then our mother's voice, sharp and thin. "Coralie's. But she's not in Boston." "I'm here," I said, leaning forward slightly. "In my home, with everyone who chose to be here." Another silence. "You told me to skip Thanksgiving," I added. "You wanted space, so we gave you a continent." The call ended before I could say anything else. Taryn didn't say a word, but she reached for the pie server and passed it to me without a single question. The house was quiet, filled with the hush that follows laughter. The fire had gone out sometime in the night, but the scent of wood smoke lingered. I stood at the stove, warming croissants from the village bakery, listening to the hum of the kettle. Taryn wandered in still in her sweatshirt and slippers. She didn't say anything at first, just poured herself coffee and sat at the end of the table where the centerpiece had wilted slightly overnight. "They've been calling everyone," she said. "Theo, Aunt Judith, even Malcolm. I think they're hoping someone will explain it for them." I didn't answer. The butter knife scraped quietly as I split a croissant in half. "You were right," she said after a minute. "I knew it. I just didn't want to risk losing what I got." I looked at her. She wasn't defensive, just honest. "I think we both lost something," I said. "But maybe we can build differently now." She nodded, not quickly, but with weight. Jonah's footsteps thudded upstairs, followed by Emma's giggle. Taryn smiled toward the ceiling. "They love it here." I smiled too. "So do I." We sat in silence a little longer, letting it stretch without needing to fix it. Then I stood to set the table again. Taryn sat beside me on the couch when I called. I put the phone on speaker before it rang. Mom answered first, Cassandra, finally. "We've been trying to understand what happened. I know I said. That's why I'm calling now." There was a shuffle. Then Dad's voice joined hers. "We just want to clear the air." I didn't speak to defend or accuse. I told them the truth. How it felt to be asked to step aside for peace. How it echoed years of being overlooked, minimized, softened into the background. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask them to apologize. I just named it. There was a long pause afterward, the kind where no one knows what to fix first. "We didn't mean to hurt you," Mom said eventually. "We've never really seen it that way." I know I said, "That's part of the problem." And then something shifted. My father asked how the house was. My mother asked what I'd been working on lately. They didn't change the subject. They didn't pivot to Taryn. They stayed with me. It didn't solve everything, but it was something. Before we hung up, I said quietly, "Next year. If you're ready to see the whole version of me, not just the parts that fit into your comfort, you're welcome here." They didn't answer right away, but they didn't say no. After I ended the call, I sat still for a moment, letting the stillness settle. Then I reached for the guest list tucked beneath the fruit bowl and wrote one more line. 1 year later, the house looked the same, but felt fuller. The same long table, the same mismatched plates, just more hands helping set them. Familiar laughter echoed through the hallways, layered now with new voices and second chances. My parents arrived late morning. No grand entrance, no assumptions. Just the quiet humility of people learning how to enter a space they didn't create. Mom took it all in candles, flickering cousins, stirring cranberry sauce, Emma helping Jonah fold napkins. She stood beside me in the kitchen holding a dish of roasted carrots. "This is extraordinary," she said. "I'm proud of you." I nodded soft and steady. I didn't need the words anymore, but I still let them land. Later, as we gathered around the table and the room warmed with conversation, I looked at the faces that had shown up not because of obligation, but because they wanted to be here. I realized the foundation had shifted. This wasn't a reclamation anymore. It was a creation. Sometimes the deepest love isn't inherited, it's chosen. And rebuilt?